Now, the clashes between Israel and Hamas have replaced the pandemic from the global headlines to a large extent. We've seen 11 days of fighting. More than 200 people have died. This includes 65 children. And there's no sign of a ceasefire yet. All we have are conflicting statements. This morning, a senior official from Hamas said that a ceasefire is being discussed and that the world can expect an end to violence in 1 or 2 days.
A ceasefire in Gaza Strip is now being discussed with mediators and Hamas. I think it will be within a day or two. God knows when mediators will succeed in reaching this equation.
God knows when the mediators will succeed, he says. Who are these mediators? America, Egypt, France, the United Nations, among others. US President Joe Biden has made 4 phone calls to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a week. What is he saying? De-escalate, wind down the offensive. In the latest conversation on Wednesday, Biden told Netanyahu that he expected significant de-escalation from Israel and a path towards a ceasefire. But Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to be in no mood to back down. Today, rockets rained on Gaza once again. Israeli fighter jets were seen in action. They conducted fresh airstrikes. Large clouds of smoke were seen across the skyline of Gaza as Prime Minister Netanyahu declared that he is, quote-unquote, determined to continue the offensive.
I greatly appreciate the support of the American president, our friend Joe Biden, for the self-defense of the state of Israel. I am determined to continue this operation until its aim is met to restore peace and security to you, the citizens of Israel.
This message from the Prime Minister was for his domestic audience. Officially, Israel has denied that negotiations are taking place, but privately, Israel has reportedly been talking to Hamas and trying to work out a deal. What could this deal look like? What kind of terms are they discussing for a ceasefire? This is what we've learned. Israel wants Hamas to halt all rocket fire at Israeli cities. It wants Hamas to stop digging tunnels, attack tunnels towards Israel, and it wants an end to all violent demonstrations on the Gaza-Israeli border. What about the other side? What does Hamas want? They too have released their own list of demands, and they want 2 resolutions from Israel. One is on the pending eviction of Palestinians in East Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah, and 2 on the Israeli police action at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Hamas wants Israel to condemn both these events. Meanwhile, the hunt for a diplomatic solution has gathered pace. Today, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas visited Tel Aviv. What is Germany's role in this conflict? It wants to discuss what the international community can do to push for a ceasefire. Today, this German Minister Maas met with the Israeli Prime Minister, the Israeli Foreign Minister, and other leaders in the cabinet. He was taken on a tour of a destroyed home as well. And this is where the minister from Germany was accompanied by the Czech and Slovakian foreign ministers. Back in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel said Israel has a right to self-defense, but there needs to be a sustainable truce between Israel and Hamas.
We
stand for Israel's right to self-defense, and that's why it is right that Israel is taking massive action. But on the other hand, we want to contribute to diplomatic attempts to secure a long-term and sustainable situation in the region. Unfortunately, this has not happened over decades, but that's no reason to pursue efforts.
Meanwhile, officials in Gaza are now counting the cost of this war, and this is what their estimates say. In the last 11 days, at least 184 residential towers and houses and 33 media centers have been completely demolished. This is their estimate. Together, they're valued at $92 million. And that's not all. More than 1,000 housing units have either been completely demolished or partially but seriously destroyed. In all, Gaza could have suffered an economic loss of more than $322 million. The United Nations General Assembly is due to discuss the conflict today. Before that, France made a fresh move for a resolution from the United Nations Security Council, the UNSC. But we know it won't sail. The Americans have already said that they will not support the French call for resolution. So far, the Security Council has met 4 times to discuss the Israeli-Palestinian violence, the fighting now. 4 meetings and not a single resolution. That's because the United States will not allow it. In the last 50 years, we can tell you, the US has blocked more than 50 resolutions against Israel at the United Nations. And even now, it says Hamas and Israel must work out something privately. It's a fact that a UNSC resolution will not change anything on the ground unless both sides want to. It's also a fact that permanent members with veto powers have made this body useless. So if and when they achieve a ceasefire, it will be despite the United Nations and not because